All right, guys, Thursday night, man. Here we are. Great week. You guys are here week after week, and I appreciate you all so much, man. And it's great to hear, progress reports as far as our prayers, and God answering those. And, it's just amazing, man. I'm so thrilled to be, with you guys week after week, man. It's such an honor and such a blessing. Tonight, we are going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 30. So if you have your Bible, we're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 30. If not, I'm going to go ahead and share a screen, bring that up tonight. And I just want to, I know it's a lot, but I really want to concentrate on this verse. You see, we admire King David in the Bible for being the righteous king of Israel, God, man after God's own heart, and, Psalm 23 and everything that's wrapped around David. But in this particular time in David's life, David was running from God. He was running from Saul, who wanted to kill him. So David pretty much was not pursuing God. He wasn't doing the things of God. He pretty much walked away from God. David was pursuing his own career, if you could say, to a matter of sense. He was a soldier. So he was doing what soldiers do. He was raiding villages. So David was living in Zilgad in a Philistine territory. The Philistines, just to give you a brief, quick history lesson on that, were the arch enemies of Israel. So here he is working on behalf of the Philistines, raiding villages, killing people, taking, plunders and spoils, on their behalf. But at this point, the Philistines didn't trust David because they were going to invade Judah, the southern kingdom of Israel. So what they said is, hey, David, they cut him loose. David pretty much lost his job. So here's a man that was so consumed in his career, we could look at it in modern terms, all of a sudden he finds himself unemployed with 600 men that he needs to employ. So they take a 3-day journey back to their hometown. So as they're approaching, they see this billowing black smoke coming from Zilgad. And so they weren't greeted with their wives and their children who were waiting for them on the road. They suddenly knew something was wrong. So as they approached the city, here it is, the entire city had been leveled, had been burned to the ground. There was nothing left of Zilgad. It had literally been torched. So the Amalekites had come in, they had raided the village since there was no defense because David had took every, bodied warrior with him. He had taken them out to battle. So there was nobody left to defend Zilgad. So the Amalekites came in, and through God's mercy, not one person was killed, not one animal was killed. They were taken captive as a whole entire village. Every man's spouse, his children, they were gone. So these 600 men show back up to this town and to find nothing but rubble. And we hear it says that they wept until they could not weep anymore. They had no more tears left in them. But when the tears were gone, they turned to David, and they started murmuring, saying they wanted to kill him. They wanted to stone him to death because David was the problem behind this. David was the one that had left Israel and had gone with the enemy and decided he was just going to work for the Philistines. So for 16 months, David was on the run. David was running from God. For 16 months, there was no Psalms. There was nothing recorded that David did for God because he was literally on the run. He was running from God. And I think that's where a lot of us are today. We're running from God, pursuing our own interest, just as David was. But now David finds himself in a crossroads. He comes back home and he's got nothing. David has lost everything. He's lost his position with the Philistines. So he's not raiding anymore. There's no source of income anymore. He comes back home. There is no home. It's leveled. His wife is, his 2 wives are gone. And the men that were with him, that follow him, that are loyal to him, their homes are burned down. Their wives and children have been taken captive by a ruthless, band of soldiers. Their livestock is gone. Everything. They have lost everything. at this point. They're devastated. They're simply devastated. And I think that's what's happening to us as men today. We're pursuing our careers, we're pursuing our personal, lives, the things that we want, whether it's entertainment, whether it's, it's our job, but we're not pursuing God. We're not focusing on God. We're focusing on everything else because we're running, whether we want to believe it or not, we're running from God. And there was a moment there where David wasn't speaking to God because he was too busy pursuing the things that David wanted. And that cost him. And that cost him dearly. Because when David returns back home, there's no home to return to. There's no family to return to. There is nothing. And David was devastated. He didn't know where to turn to. But what does David do? Immediately, David seeks God. And he calls for the priest. And he asks for the ephod, which was the way that they, back in the ancient, they would communicate with God. And he asked God, shall I pursue them? And immediately God says, pursue them. You're going to get everything back. Notice how God doesn't not answer David. Because God could have simply said, hey, David, I'm not talking to you. I'm going in silent mode, just like you have for the last 16 months with me. We're totally incommunicated here. So you know what? The lines are cut off. But God didn't do that. He answered David and he said, go. So in that moment, we see how God forgave David for his sin and told him, I'm going to give you back what that enemy has taken from you. No matter that you've walked away from me for 16 months, I answered you at the first time you said, hey, God, I need you. God answered. God was there, even when David wasn't. And I think as men, we have, in our pursuit of trying to do the right thing, we have encamped ourselves in the Philistine camp, where we know today is corporate America or earth itself or just general lifestyle. We've embraced the world and we're basically, doing the things of the world, and we've forgotten about God. We've forgotten where we need to be. And a lot of men have done that. And a lot of men, in doing that, the Amalekites have come into our homes and they have burned down our homes and they have taken our children and they have taken our wives. And some men just haven't pursued to get them back because we've been so busy focusing on something else that we thought was going to build us up, something that we thought was going to give us the strength, this power this thing that we thought was going to provide for us, that was going to be our security. But we kept chasing the wind. We kept fighting for the world. And all the time we are silent with God. So David grabs his 600 men and they take off in pursuit. But when they get to the brook of Besor, 200 men say they can't go on. They're so beat up. They're so tired that they can't go any further. They can't cross the brook to continue to pursue the Amalekites. Now, gentlemen, I got to ask you a question tonight. How tired can you be that if you knew your family was held captive, you knew where they were, that you couldn't go and get them, that you couldn't go and bring them back? How exhausted do you have to be to say, you know what? Yeah, I know it's my wife and my kids and they mean the world to me, but I'm not going to chase them down. I can't. I don't have the strength. And you say, man, that's crazy. Any man would draw strength from where he doesn't have it, and he'd cross that brook and no matter what. But you know what? Many of us are those men, those 200 men of the book of Besor. And that's a tough gut punch to even say that. And as I read this chapter, and for the first time, I've read this chapter many a times, the story, but never has it come to life in my own life. We spend our lives trying to build things outside of our home, and we forget what matters most. We're covered at work. We're covered on so many things outside of our homes. But then there's a band of Amalekites coming to raid our homes. And then we get back and we find that things are destroyed. We find that we don't relate with our kids anymore. We find that, Our wives, we're not communicating with them. We find that we don't have a relationship with God. And we wonder what happened. Well, how did my village, how did my home get to burn down? Because we were off raiding villages and just doing what we wanted to do for our own pursuits and not pursuing the things that God has called us to do. We decided to walk away from God, and we left our defenses at home for the enemy to destroy us. But then we get to the scene where you have 200 men that are so beat up that they can't cross the brook to continue looking for their families, to literally wipe off the face of the earth the men that did this. And I looked at those 200 men, the story, and I sat back for a moment when I was studying this, and I'm like, and I tried to put myself in their shoes, and I said I can relate to them, because you know what, I was that man at the brook. I wasn't good because you know what, life just brought me down so hard that I was just tired. I was tired from work. I was tired from everything. I was tired from ministry. I was tired from so many things that when I get home, I didn't have time for my kids. I didn't have time for my family. I just wanted to sleep. I wanted to eat. And I just wanted to zone out. I just wanted to take a break. So I understand what these men were going through. I didn't pursue any further. But yet my home was burning. My home was in rubble. My children were taken captive. The world will beat you up. And some of us here tonight, or someone here that's going to listen to this message, you may be beaten up tonight. You may be to the point where you got nothing left in the tank. You're to the point where you're physically, mentally, and spiritually just exhausted, where you don't know where you're going to draw your next breath of strength from. You're standing in the brook tonight. Your family's on the other side, held captive. You're on this side, and you're physically just beat down, man. You're just beat down. You got nothing left to go. A divorce will do that to you. Addictions will do that to you. Life will do that to you. It will make you stay by the brook and not pursue. Those are the things that will bring us down mentally and physically. And then when we turn around, behind us is nothing but rubble and ashes of what we called a beautiful home, a wonderful marriage, amazing kids, a great life, a great spiritual life. We go to church on Sundays, but we're literally at the brook because we got nothing to give. We got nothing to offer. We go home, we look back at our homes, and we don't leave the brook because I can't go any further. I've given everything I've got to my job. I've given everything I've got to, doing stuff around the house, this and that. And, the demands that are placed on me as a man, as a father, as a husband, as a son. And I give everything to everyone. But when I came back home, it's just rubble. And I think a lot of men are coming home to rubbled homes. I think that's the biggest crisis we're facing today. Is we got too many men on the brook of Bashor and too many Zilgads that are just still smoldering and burning. We've got men who don't want to pursue and villages and homes that are just burned down to nothing. So David had a decision to make. Do I continue or do I leave these men behind? But David had to pursue. David had the passion. He had the heart because you know what? On the other side of that brook, his wives were there. The women, the wives and sons and daughters of the men who had fought and bled with were there. So he couldn't say, I'm tired. He couldn't take the day off and say, you know what? Eventually the Amalekites will either kill him or let him go. Or, I'll wait for God to do the miracle. He mustered up whatever strength he had in him. He dug deep inside of him. And 400 men answered the call and said, let's do this. And they went and they pursued and they fought and they slaughtered and they killed and they got back every single one. Every wife came home. Every son came home. Every daughter came home. Every piece of cattle came home untouched. Because they pursued. They did. For the first time in 16 months, David had actually done what God had called him to do. And it turned everything around. What David lost to sin, and he lost everything, God gave it back, restored him with grace. So maybe that's us tonight. Maybe we've made some bad decisions. Maybe we're so far apart from God that we couldn't see him if he stood in front of us. That we wouldn't recognize him with a name tag that says, hello, my name is God the Almighty. Maybe for you, it's been 16 months, 16 years, 16 weeks, or 16 minutes. But nonetheless, you're standing at the brook and you're looking behind you and you're saying, what happened to my life? How am I so far away from God right now? And can I make it back? Gentlemen, it's time for us to come home tonight. If I can employ one thing tonight in this message, is that we need to come home. We need to come home. It doesn't matter if you lived in Zilgad and your house, your city's burnt down, meaning your home. Because God will restore it. Just we see this in 1 Samuel 30. He gave them back his wives. He gave them back their children, and their wives, and their cattle. And I'm sure they rebuilt again, because from that point on, David served God. He became the king of Israel, and David is David's story. But for those 16 months, David did things on his own. David pursued the career goals. He pursued the corporate ladder. He pursued the things that men want. He built up an army. He built up esteem. He built up power, wealth. But he built it without God. But then God came the moment of reckoning. When God says, you can build all you want, but I'm going to bring you to your knees. And sure enough, imagine you are coming home and you hear sirens and ambulances and police cars and fire trucks racing by you. And you're saying to yourself, man, that's a big fire. What a mess. And as you keep going, you hear it closer and you see billowing smoke coming from your neighborhood. And as you get there, and an officer stops you and says, hey, you can't come through here. Something devastating has happened. And you say, no, I live there. That's my house, just a few blocks from there. And you give them the address, and you're the owner of where this incident is happening. And the first words out of your mouth is, my wife, my kids are inside. And they let you through, and you come in, and you find this devastation. Man, as I read this, I felt for the man. I felt his pain when he says that they had no more tears to cry. Because simply, he walked away from God. And I think a lot of us are walking into our homes and we're finding that same situation where we're coming home every night to marriages that are not working, that children that are dysfunctional, and just our own personal lives, just a hot mess. And God's saying, you left me, but I need you to come back to me. And if you do, I'm going to restore you. But it isn't until you come back. This isn't going to change. You've done things on your own, but now I want you to do things with me. For 16 months, David didn't write a psalm. For 16 months, David didn't pray, didn't consult with God, didn't require of God. But the minute David lost everything, the first words out of his mouth, David came back to God. Because David remembered everything that God had done for him. David that slew Goliath at this point, that had killed the bears, that had killed the lions. That was the David in the moments that God was with him that he remembered. Saying, man, you know what? God got me through a lot of things. And he can do it again. And God didn't put him in timeout. God didn't abandon him. God didn't let him kill, the Amalekites kill their entire families, which could have happened, to teach David a lesson. Because that's not the God we love, and that's not the God we serve. He took them to get David's attention and to tell David, I need you to come home, son. You need to come home. There's millions of men across this country that need to come home. Their friends and their brothers and people that need to come home. There's people at the brook of Beshor today saying, I can't pursue anymore, and have watched their families being taken captive by alcohol or drugs or pornography or divorce. Men who have lost their sons and their daughters and their wives and have lost it all. And they're devastated. And they're just sitting there by that brook with everything before them and nothing behind them. If they would only find the strength to keep pursuing and doing what God wants them to do, we wouldn't have 200 men at the brook. We'd have 600 men pursuing the Amalekites. Gentlemen, I don't know where you're at tonight. I know for the last couple of days as I've read this, I know where I'm at. I've been to the brook, I've crossed, and I've raided the Amalekite camp at one point or another. But I've stood there at the brook, and I've seen the destruction behind me, and I've seen God's providence before me. And I've had to draw strength where I didn't have it. I've had to dig deep inside of me. And if we're here week after week after week, it's because count me as part of the raiding group that's going to cross the river with you to bring back what maybe any of us have lost. As I said before, because of David's sin, he lost everything. But through God's grace, he was restored. The story doesn't end there. The story ends in David's redemption. He comes back and he plunders the Amalekites, wipes them all out. And when he gets back, the men tell him, hey, these guys that didn't cross, they don't deserve squat. They don't deserve anything that we got. Give them their wives and their kids and be done with it. And David said, no. He says, we're equal partners in this. Just because they couldn't cross the river makes them any less. They fought with us in the past. They've bled with us in the past. And I refuse to cut them out of what God has given us. And David made it a statute and an ordinance in Israel the whole time he was king, that was to happen, that no man was going to be left behind. Maybe you're on the other side of the river, but there's a man that's still sitting on the other side who needs you to come back for him with the spoils of war, meaning the word of God. You need to build up that man. You need to give him strength. You need to pray for him. You need to be with him. You know who that man is tonight. And only you can reach out to that man. I can't, but you can. Because that's who God has placed in your heart to do so. I think each and every one of us knows a guy that's by the brook of Beshor tonight. Gentlemen, we need to come home. We need to come home. We've been doing things our own way. We've been pursuing and raiding and pillaging. But God has hit the brakes. Because look around you and look outside you and look in your homes tonight and ask yourself, There's smoke billowing from my house. Am I at the brook, with no strength because of all the decisions that I've made? I'm just burnt out. I got nothing left in the tank, mentally, physically, spiritually. Or am I out pursuing, trying to get back my family, trying to get back my kids, trying to get back my life again? We're all at some point in the story. We are all literally at one point in this story. I don't know where you're at tonight. I don't know where you're at tonight. But I do know that you need to come home. We need to come home. As men of God, we need to come home. We can't stay at the brook anymore. We can't dwell on the rubble. We need to pursue and get back what we've lost. We need to pursue and get back what we've lost. We need to get back to God and pursue our enemy and get back what we've lost. So what have you lost tonight? What have you lost in your life that you said, man, I'm not getting that. I'm not ever getting that back. Maybe it's a brother that you haven't talked to, or a cousin or a friend that you had just had a falling out with. And it was, or just something in your life that you said, man, it meant something to me. And you lost it because of a bad decision or whatever the case may be. Gentlemen, it's time to get it back tonight. Get away from the brook. Get some strength. Man, I will pursue to the ends of the earth with you. Get it back tonight. Stay in the fight. That's the title of tonight, man. Staying in the fight. You have to stay in the fight. There's no time to sit by the brook and just say, I'm too tired to continue on. You better get strength where you ain't got none. You better get some mental capacity where you feel that you don't have it. You better muster up where you feel you can't. Because on the other side of that brook is your life, your wife, your family. Everything that has been taken from you is simply there waiting, that is captive, waiting for you to take it back. So tonight, whenever you feel right, read this verse again. And do what David did. Recognize that we've been apart from him and that we need to come home. And he's not going to put you in timeout. He's not going to tell you no. And when you tell him, can I pursue? Can I pursue my enemies and will I have the victory? I think resoundingly he's going to tell you, just like he told David, go and pursue. Gentlemen, go and pursue tonight. Go and pursue. Stay in the fight, gentlemen. Stay in the fight. Guys, that's all I got, man. Floor is open for discussion tonight.